The covert narcissist doesn't seduce you with charm. They seduce you with pain. Not loud pain, soft pain, relatable pain, strategically exposed pain. They don't future fake with diamonds or dream vacations. They future fake with healing, with intimacy, with sentences that sound like hope but function like a leash. I've never felt this safe before. I want to grow with you. I've just never had anyone who gets it. They don't promise you a life. They promise you a role. And once you take it, the trap closes. They don't need to be consistent because they've convinced you they're trying. And so you excuse the mood swings. You explain away the cold spells. You forgive the disappearances. Because this time, they said they'd work on it. This time, they cried. This time, they meant it. But they don't grow. They recycle. They don't improve. They recalibrate. Every new wave of affection resets the timeline. Every new confession rewrites the narrative. Every breakdown becomes a reason to stay, because leaving now would mean abandoning them in the middle of their healing. And what kind of person does that? They don't hold you with love, they hold you with possibility. The idea that it's going to get better, that you're almost there, that the version of them you imagined is just around the corner. But the corner never comes, because there is no version, only the performance, only the delay, only the future, always the future. That's how the covert narcissist survives. Not by overpowering you, but by giving you just enough to keep imagining. They don't destroy your hope, they use it. They never wanted love, they wanted belief. And the more you believed in their growth, their wounds, their potential, the more they fed on your faith, not because they were healing, but because they knew you wouldn't leave someone who was trying. They weren't trying, they were timing. The covert narcissist doesn't destroy you with force, they destroy you with softness. They don't yell, they wince. They don't blame you with rage, they do it with disappointment. And that's what makes it so hard to see. They frame every reaction as an injury, every boundary as rejection, every moment you stand up for yourself as proof that you're the problem. They say they shut down when scared. They say they never feel good enough. They say they're just trying to be better. And now you're apologizing to the person slowly erasing you. They weaponize their own damage. They lean into their pain like a strategy. And you bend, you reassure, you shrink so they don't spiral. Every conversation becomes a minefield. You're afraid of triggering a collapse, afraid of becoming the villain in their emotional movie. So you soften your tone. You explain everything twice. You tiptoe around truth, not to protect yourself, but to protect their reaction to it. And all the while, they're watching, measuring, storing away exactly what parts of you they need to press next time. They don't gaslight like overt narcissists. They don't deny what happened. They reframe it just enough to confuse you, just enough to make you doubt your tone, your timing, your delivery. Suddenly, the conversation is no longer about what they did. It's about how you made them feel when you brought it up. You become the aggressor. They become the victim and the topic. Gone. You learn to police yourself. You edit your honesty. You stop asking for your needs, not because you're healed, but because you're exhausted. They break you with exhaustion, with circular logic, with hyper-introspection and fake accountability. They say I'll try harder, not because they mean it, but because it resets the cycle. And in time, you lose the most valuable thing you ever had, your own clarity. Not because you're weak, but because they made you believe that love meant adapting, and that abuse meant understanding. But now, you're starting to remember. You're starting to see that the person they convinced you to become was never love, just obedience. The covert narcissist never loved you, not because you weren't lovable, but because they don't recognize love. Only reflection, only usefulness, only supplied. They studied your kindness and mirrored it. They scanned your trauma and became the solution. They watched the way you love and gave just enough back to keep you reaching. But what they gave wasn't real. It was calculation, a mask, a carefully curated simulation of healing, intimacy, growth. They never intended to meet you in the middle. They needed you on your knees. You were cast as the savior in their story, but not because they wanted to be. Saved because they needed. You too stay stuck in the attempt. Your growth would expose them. Your wholeness would collapse the illusion. So they kept you spinning. They chipped away at your identity slowly, not with direct attacks, but with rewrites. They told you who you were, then punished you when you acted like it. You became quiet, careful, emotionally attuned to their every shift. You lost your voice in the name of peace. You lost your standards in the name of compassion. You lost yourself trying to love someone who was never real to begin with. But you're here now. You're seeing it. You're remembering that love doesn't feel like hype. It doesn't feel like guilt. It doesn't feel like losing. Love is steady. It's mutual. It doesn't need to be earned through pain. In that realization, that's where the healing starts. Not in fixing them, not in waiting for closure, but in finally choosing reality over hope, peace over potential, yourself over their projection. You were never too much, never too sensitive, never too dramatic. You were surrounded by someone who needed you confused, because your confusion was their control. Your silence was their shield. Your self-doubt was their safety. But not anymore. The spell is breaking. The fog is lifting. And for the first time in far too long, you're starting to feel like you again. Not because they changed, but because you're done waiting. Subscribe if you've ever questioned your reality to keep someone else comfortable. Comment the moment their mask cracked. Share this with someone trapped in almost love. You don't owe them another version of yourself.